Greetings, friends of liberty. When I saw the recent title to a Lotus Eater's video in my Firefox browser, a video in which Carl Benjamin, also known as Sargon of Akkad, discussed President Trump with two other panelists, and I saw that the thumbnail title of the video read, "Never Doubt the Donald," I couldn't help but burst out laughing. That, I thought, was a masterful use of irony. But then, upon watching the video, a great confusion came upon me, because it seemed that, at times, the title was meant seriously. And so, in considering the evident absurdity that such sober-minded individuals as Carl and his two other panelists, bound to reason and the facts as they are, could ever have meant it earnestly, let's briefly survey 10 instances of President Donald J. Trump's actions and statements to see how wise the counsel is to never doubt the Donald. When President Trump, on April 30th, in a television interview with ABC's Terry Morgan, claimed that a picture that he had earlier shared on his Truth social media network showed the knuckles and fingers of Kilmar Abrego Garcia with the tattoos of the drug gang MS-13 on them, should I believe him? When President Trump, according to one estimate, told 30,000 lies in his first term? So when he claimed the picture showed that the actual letters, M and S, and the actual numbers 1 and 3, what was the probability that that statement would be true? When interviewer Terry Morgan pointed out that the letters M and S and the numbers 1 and 3 had been digitally added, photoshopped into the picture itself, should I believe President Trump when he claimed that Morgan's pointing this out wasn't very nice? You mean Truth Social isn't about the truth, Mr. President? And when Morgan subsequently said that the symbols on Abrego Garcia's knuckles could possibly be interpreted as MS-13, but that the symbols didn't literally spell out MS-13, should I believe the president when he replied, no, yet MS-13 as clear as you can be, not interpreted? Number 2, and should I never doubt the Donald when he claimed that the solution to the destructive power of MS-13 and Tren de Aragua and all these numerous drug gangs and cartels that are multiplying and growing like mushrooms after a rainstorm, the more he tries to fight them, the solution is to send American assassination teams into Mexico? After creating a kill list of drug lords? Making, as the Donald said, appropriate use of special forces, cyber warfare, and other overt and covert actions to inflict maximum damage on cartel leadership, infrastructure, and operations? Should I believe his MAGA hit squads would be effective when the whole history of drug wars in the 20th century shows the opposite, that the more you go after drug selling and trafficking, the more risky and thus lucrative it becomes, and thus the richer and more powerful these gangs become? Did prohibition in the U.S. get rid of Al Capone, or instead create him and thousands like him throughout America? Number 3, but surely when it comes to tariff and trade issues, we should never doubt the Donald, right, Carl? So when he claimed that from 1789 to 1913 we were a tariff-backed nation and the United States was proportionally the wealthiest it has ever been, it wasn't really because America essentially had no federal income tax during this period, right? Imagine having no federal income tax. Wouldn't you feel and be richer significantly every year? It wasn't that which explains America's stupendous 19th century economic growth. Trump can be trusted and not leave that crucial fact out, right, Carl? And surely one should never doubt the president when he claimed on April 2nd that Switzerland had, against U.S. goods, an overall 61% tariff rate, South Korea 51%, Vietnam 90%, Thailand 72%, China 67%, and Taiwan 64%. But wasn't it actually the case that Switzerland really had only about a 1.7% general tariff against U.S. goods? South Korea 8.4%, Cambodia 7.9, Vietnam 5.1, Thailand 6.3, China 3, and Taiwan 1.7%, right? And when Trump implied or claimed that his 2018 tariffs of 25% against Chinese steel were a great success, it couldn't really be the case that they actually resulted in the net loss of 250,000 American jobs, right? Would you doubt what he says on tariffs, Carl? Number 4. Now, when it comes to Ukraine, we of course know without any doubt that the Donald strategy of pressuring Ukraine to capitulate to Putin's demands should never be doubted. It's been a huge success, right? And when Trump said that Ukraine and Russia were like two children fighting in the park, you'd never doubt that moral analogy, right? That's what the Battle of Britain was too, right, Carl? Just two children squabbling. Not an aggressor nation, Germany, headed by a genocidal dictator attacking a peaceful nation, Britain, right? No. Trust the Donald, as when he voted in the UN with Russia, Belarus, and North Korea to deny that Russia started a war of aggression and genocide against Ukraine. Trust the Donald when he wants to create economic partnerships with that failed state of Russia whose GDP with 140 million people was less than Canada's with 40 million in 2024. Is that why you've started going to church now, Carl? Because you want to cultivate your ability to believe in the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen? Number 5. Now, surely all you Lotus eaters are aware that the U.S. ambassador to Britain in 1938 was Joseph P. Kennedy Sr., one of that clan of Massachusetts' Irish Kennedys, who said that democracy in Britain was finished, who along with Chamberlain said that appeasing Hitler was the smartest policy, and that there was no conceivable way Britain could beat Germany. Oddly enough, his stance was similar to Trump's in denigrating Ukraine, when Trump famously said that Ukraine doesn't have the cards against Russia. But isn't it strange how badly that statement is aged and how well Ukraine is fighting Russia to a standstill with 1/6 the population? But I bring Joseph P. Kennedy Sr. up because it's a strange coincidence that the anti-Semitic Jittery Joe, who fled London to the countryside during the Blitz, was the grandfather of another Kennedy, RFK Jr., what do you know? Who's now amazingly been appointed by Trump to head Health and Human Services, and whose tenure there has been distinguished by firing many of those doctors and scientists who understand the efficacy of using vaccines to treat many diseases. And who, not surprisingly, has presided over the reoccurrence of measles outbreaks in the U.S. with a number of measles cases this year, the second highest since measles were eliminated 25 years ago. But surely we shouldn't doubt Trump's judgment in appointing RFK Jr. to head Health and Human Services, right? Just as we shouldn't doubt his appointing Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence, or Signalgate's Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense, or the witless Steve Witkoff as enemy to Russia. You have faith in Daddy, right, Carl? Number 6. Now, when an American president is sworn into office, Carl, he promises that he will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Surely we would never doubt that the Donald would ever betray his oath of office, right? Not like Biden when he cancels student debt loans in direct violation of a Supreme Court ruling. Not Trump. But isn't it a bit odd that when asked in May of 2025 whether he had to uphold the Constitution of the United States as president, the Donald replied, "I don't know." Is he going senile, you think? Forgetting in May what he had promised in January? And when President Trump used the Alien Enemies Act, which is only meant to apply in times of war and to potential enemy combatants, that couldn't have been a lawless exercise of executive power, right? And when his ICE agents barge into homes and places of employment without a warrant, at least in all appearances, violating the Fourth Amendment stricture against unreasonable searches and seizures, you wouldn't call that unconstitutional, right? And when his masked men often fail to simply identify themselves, which is a violation of federal law? I mean, J.D. Vance wants those deportation numbers up, come hell or high water. Doesn't the Constitution say in Article 7 that the ends justify the means, Carl? I mean, what's an amendment or two among MAGA friends? And when the Donald was asked whether he would respect the due process clause of the Constitution, are you aware that again he had an apparent senior moment saying, I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know? Maybe he just hasn't gotten that far in reading the Constitution through, making it to the 5th and 14th Amendments? Let me ask you this, Carl. How about if you had been visiting the U.S. and like at least 50 other innocent people were simply whisked away to El Salvador to rot in prison for life? Would you still not doubt the Donald after 30 years at CCOT? I mean, if you're one of the eggs broken to make the deportation omelet, that's just the way it is, right? You'd still not doubt, separated for life from your wife and children, while shuffling through the corridors with your head bent low by their guards? You'd still feel like giving Stephen Miller an attaboy every day of the week, right? Number 7. Now, your Lotus eaters say, Carl, that we shouldn't doubt the Donald, but does that apply ethically as well? So would you deny that accepting the gift of a $400 million 747 from the Qatari royal family violates the Constitution's foreign emoluments clause? And do you realize that there is an even darker possibility? That Trump demanded the plane as a quid pro quo from the Qataris as the entrance fee for doing business with his administration? That it wasn't really a gift at all? By the way, after flacking as a Tesla salesman on the White House lawn in April and buying a Model S, Trump already has had a change of heart and wants to sell it. That could be a good buy. The mileage is low on that one. Number 8. How about crypto, Carl? You guys at MAGA UK wouldn't doubt the Donald here either, right? Since he said he's a big crypto fan and has been there right from the start. I mean, how can you go wrong with a currency endorsed by the likes of Snoop Dogg, Mike Tyson, Paris Hilton, Lindsay Lohan, and Jack Dorsey? You remember Jack, right? So if you're in the market for a Trump meme coin, having faith in Trump as you do, I would suggest one or more of the following: Official Trump, MAGA, Super Trump Coin, Dolan Trump, Freedom Fighters, the Trump Token, President.exe, and Trump.inu. As Trump says, Bitcoin is all about having fun. Number 9. And you certainly wouldn't doubt the Donald when he says that Canada should become the 51st state, right? Would you, as president, use the same methods as Trump in starting an economic war against the whole Canadian economy to cripple it in order to try to coerce their annexation? Tearing to shreds the very free trade agreement, the USMCA, that you yourself negotiated and finalized in 2018? And then, with delicious irony in 2025, having yet another senior moment, calling the people who signed that deal fools? Do you doubt that Trump was here exhibiting the only instance of self-criticism, albeit unintentional, that he's ever given himself in the last 20 years? But maybe it's the case that you Lotus eaters want to throw the Canadians out of the Commonwealth because they've been led by a woke snowboarder for the last 6 years? Which brings us to the final Canadian oddity. Why did Trump call the Liberal Canadian Premier Justin Trudeau the governor, but is refraining from calling the newly elected Liberal Premier Mark Carney the governor? Maybe because he realizes that 95% of all Canadians gave him at least a rhetorical middle finger after the way he's treated them? If you were a Canuck, would you think he was a great man of history? And by the way, Trump recently slapped down the Israelis when they were going to bomb Iran even more, and you guys thought that was a boss move. But in reality, it was a bozo move, since all the dictators like Putin and the Ayatollah understand is the prospect of a bomb on their head. Bomb the rubble until it bounces. The Israelis had the right idea, along with the desirability of regime change, which Trump doesn't get. But did Trump get from Iran What did he get from Iran, from his attempted ceasefire appeasement? He got a fatwa issued yesterday on his head. Brilliant, Donald. Finally, number 10. Given as we've seen how in so many instances, it certainly seems that one should, to be prudent, doubt the Donald. Does that mean he never tells the truth or never does any good? No, sometimes he actually does. Let's now give him credit where credit is due. A, his recently ordered strikes on the Iranian nuclear facilities were well done, although whether it was a bit too late and shouldn't have been ordered even earlier remains to be seen. But did it really require as much bravery as his Secretary of Defense bragged when the Israelis already did the Americans the huge favor of taking out all of the Iranian radar and ground-based air defense systems? Wasn't it a kind of walk in the park after that? Sort of like playing basketball after your center has taken out your defender with a pick and you can take all the sweet time you want to hit the three? B, I agree his accomplishment in getting the Europeans towards contributing more to their own self-defense was very welcome. C, his recent loosening of irrational American regulations on how much radiation nuclear power plants can emit was an excellent first step in decriminalizing American nuclear energy. D, his promotion of fracking and oil and gas drilling is highly commendable. And finally, E, I agree his dismantling of governmental affirmative action and DEI has been excellent in attacking the practice of discrimination in federal contracting and throughout federal agencies. And he's certainly adhering to civil rights law when he attacks private institutions who accept federal funds and engage in discrimination in employment and admissions. But what the president, not believing in the value of personal freedom, doesn't understand is that the best way to deal with racism is just to completely privatize all colleges and universities, to repeal the morals legislation sections of the Civil Rights Act, such as Title 7 and 9, and to let all those institutions do whatever they want. Let them bear the consequences of their racism or lack thereof. That's the best way to stop it. But trying to punish Harvard by preventing it from accepting foreign students? That's highly destructive, both for America and all those students, and likely yet again unconstitutional. Does he not realize how many students come to America and do great research here or start great businesses and companies? Does he not want to find a cure for Alzheimer's or cancer? Neither of us would really doubt, would we, Carl, that if he were attempting to prevent your sons or daughters from attending Harvard, that would be an act of pure presidential malice. That would have nothing to do with getting rid of DEI